The sun was just beginning to rise over the dusty hills when the first signs of life stirred in the quiet village of Durango Creek. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew and wild sage. It had been 3 long years since the cowboy rode away, leaving behind the girl who had once looked at him as if he were the whole sky. 3 years since love had been tucked away beneath the weight of unspoken words and the miles of untamed prairie between them. The cowboy's name was Cole Maddox, a man made of silence and scars. He had always been a drifter, chasing cattle, storms, and the kind of freedom that never came cheap. His hands were calloused from the rope, his eyes shadowed from the sun and the memories he carried. He never stayed in one place long enough to be known, except for that one summer when he found himself in Durango Creek, and met her. Her name was Elara. She was the blacksmith's daughter, small in frame but fierce in will. Her father's forge stood at the edge of the village, where the hammer met iron and sparks flew like fireflies. Elara worked beside him since she was a child, her hair tied back, her skin darkened by smoke, her heart untouched by any man, until Cole arrived one scorching afternoon, leading a limping horse with a coat as pale as moonlight. He had asked for help, but it was Elara who offered it. She was the one who cooled the horse's wound, who mended its shoe, who looked up at him through the shimmer of heat and caught his gaze. It was a simple exchange, a traveler's need and a villager's kindness, but from that moment, something unspoken tethered them. Cole stayed in the village that summer, working for the blacksmith in exchange for food and shelter. Day after day, he watched her move through light and flame, strong and quiet. She spoke little, but her eyes told stories. He was drawn to her stillness, her way of making ordinary things sacred. She was drawn to the way he carried the world, a man haunted, yet gentle. They never confessed anything out loud, but their silences were full of meaning. Every shared glance, every brush of hands when passing a tool, every soft exchange beneath the twilight, it was love in its purest, most fragile form. But the cowboy was not meant for roots. When the summer ended, the call of the open range grew too loud. He had debts to settle, cattle to herd, and ghosts that wouldn't let him rest. On his last morning, he came to her door before sunrise. She stood there, hands trembling, a faint streak of soot still on her cheek. He didn't know what to say, so he tipped his hat, looked at her for a long moment, and whispered, "You take care now." She nodded, unable to speak. He rode away, his silhouette swallowed by the horizon, leaving her heart aching and his empty. 3 years passed. Durango Creek changed little. Seasons came and went, bringing droughts and harvests, births and burials. Elara took over her father's forge after he fell ill. Her hands became stronger, her eyes older. She rarely spoke of the cowboy, but there were nights she would stand by the anvil long after the fire had dimmed, tracing the shape of a horseshoe she once made for him, her heart heavy with memories. Cole, meanwhile, roamed from town to town, chasing work, chasing something he couldn't name. He tried to forget her, but she lingered like a song he couldn't stop hearing. He would wake from dreams of her voice or her laughter carried by the wind. The years hardened him, but the thought of her softened the edges of his solitude. He began to realize that all the roads he rode led nowhere but back to her. And so, one autumn evening, when the leaves turned gold and the air smelled of hay and rain, he returned to Durango Creek. The village looked smaller than he remembered. Quieter. Children played by the well, women carried baskets of grain, and smoke rose from the chimneys. He tied his horse near the old forge, his heart thudding like thunder in his chest. Elara was there, her sleeves rolled up, the glow of the forge painting her face in amber light. She looked stronger, surer, but when she turned and saw him standing in the doorway, the hammer slipped from her hand. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Time seemed to fold, bringing back the summers they'd lost. "Cole," she whispered, as if saying his name would wake her from a dream. "Hey there, Elara," he said softly, removing his hat. "Been a while." She nodded, her eyes glistening. 3 years. "Yeah," he said, stepping closer. 3 years too long. He could see it then. The hurt, the disbelief, the longing all tangled in her gaze. She looked at him as if she wanted to be angry, but her heart betrayed her. "Why'd you come back?" she asked quietly. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I thought I was looking for something out there. Turns out, I'd already found it here." The sound of the forge crackled between them. Elara's breath trembled as she turned away, trying to steady herself. "You left," she said. "You didn't even say goodbye." "I didn't know how," he confessed. "Didn't reckon I deserved to." She faced him then, tears glinting like sparks. "And now you think you do." He took off his gloves and laid them on the table, his hands rough but open. "No, I don't think I deserve nothin'. But I couldn't keep writin' without tryin' to make it right." For a long moment, the only sound was the crack of fire. Then she sighed, her anger fading into something softer. "People don't change much, Cole." "Maybe not," he said. "But hearts can learn what matters." That night, they sat outside the forge, watching the sky darken into velvet. He told her stories from the trail, of storms and lost friends, of lonely nights under strange stars. She listened, her head tilted, her expression unreadable. When he asked about her, she spoke of the forge, the work, her father's passing. Her voice trembled only once, and his hand found hers. They didn't speak of love. They didn't need to. It hung in the air between them, fragile and fierce, like the first breath after drowning. Days turned into weeks. Cole stayed in the village, helping her with work, fixing fences, mending tools. People whispered, remembering the cowboy who'd left and returned. Elara tried to guard her heart, but every smile, every shared chore, every quiet evening made it harder. One night, after the first snowfall, they walked to the edge of the field where the wind howled low and lonely. The moon shone on the frozen earth, lighting their faces. Cole stopped, turned to her, and said, "You ever think some things are meant to find their way back?" She met his eyes, her breath forming clouds in the cold. "And what if they're too late?" He took her hand, his thumb tracing the line of her palm. "Then I'll spend whatever time's left proving they ain't." Elara didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest. His arms went around her, slow and certain. For the first time in years, both of them breathed freely, as if the world had finally stopped turning long enough for them to catch up. Winter melted into spring, and the fields around Durango Creek bloomed with wildflowers. The forge's fire never went out, and sometimes, at dusk, villagers would see smoke rising and hear laughter, low, warm, familiar. The cowboy no longer drifted. He had found his home, not in a place, but in a heart that had waited quietly through the seasons. Years later, when travelers passed through Durango Creek, they would sometimes hear of the blacksmith and her husband, the cowboy who once left and came back to love her true. Some said they still worked side by side, her hammer in his hands shaping iron and life alike. Others swore that at sunset, you could see them sitting together by the forge, silent and content, their love glowing as steady as the fire that had once brought them together. And though time would move on, one thing never faded: the way two hearts, once lost across the endless plains, had found their way back to each other under the same wide, forgiving sky.